It's Thursday, 11 o'clock. Wow, and it's time for this week's Watch Drop. In today's drop, we've got what I would typically call an eclectic mix, but today I'm going to call it a melange. Everything from IWC all the way through to Chrono Tokyo and everything in between. I'm going to pick out a few of my favourites. I think one that has to jump out is the Omega Speedmaster Hodinkee Special Edition. I love the introduction of colour on this, and I know that it's inspired by a very personal story for Ben Clymer, and I love that too. Just that little bit different. If you're going to choose a Speedmaster or a Moon watch, then this is really an interesting one to go for. A watch that I really quite like, although it's somewhat overlooked by the community, is this 126713. It's a two-tone GMT with a grey lower half of the bezel. It's just a really nice colourway, and I think if you are brave enough to get over the fact that it's yellow, gold and steel, it really works on the wrist. Brilliant watch. An absolute icon next to it is the 116500 stainless steel Daytona. This was the first watch where obviously they introduced the ceramic bezel on the Daytona, and it makes it so much more sporty. It actually makes it wear a little bit bigger than the earlier versions, such as this 116520. I think if you're looking for a sports watch of these two, the later ceramic bezel version is probably the one to go for, but I think there's always a time and a place for something like the steel bezel variant, particularly if you wear sort of smart casual clothing from time to time. In the middle of the table, we've got a couple of big hitters. This watch here, an FB Journe Elegante 48 with a titanium case, not the Titanite case, which has got a sort of coating to it, which makes it a little bit darker. This watch, I think, feels a little bit fresher. If I could choose any watch to play tennis in, it would be this one. And it's just so light, you don't have to worry about it, it takes some impact, and it's also absolutely brilliantly finished for a quartz watch. One of the really novel things about this watch is that if you haven't worn it in some time, once you pick it up, it will reset to exactly the right time. So it has a sort of power saving mode, and that enables it to last for years and years without changing the battery. It's just a super cool gimmick, really, but for me it brings a little bit more fun to the watch, and it's a bit of a talking point too. A couple of yellow gold watches I want to talk about as well. This Breguet here. Now this is actually a Breguet Marine, but it shares lots of the design features and I suppose DNA of the more classical side of watchmaking from Breguet. So you've got your coin edge, but what you have is this really intricate crown with Breguet written all around it, and crown guards because it's a slightly more sporty watch. I suppose there's an element more robustness to this design. It's slightly different, and for that, I really like it. I also think it's quite nice to have a closed case back on a Breguet. I don't know why, it just feels a little bit more vintage inspired. Really cool watch. Next up, Patek Philippe 5035. These watches have been overlooked for a long time. I think a lot of people prefer the sort of 5140, 3940 Perpetual Calendars for their symmetry and the dial that's slightly less condensed with text and indices. But right now I feel like there's a movement back towards these watches because they've been overlooked for such a long time. When you pair it with the right strap, such as this one, I think it just works so well. It's slightly thicker, but this fundamentally was the world's first annual calendar. So you've got those sort of, I guess, bragging rights. You've got that sort of interest that the 3940 and the 5140 just doesn't have. It's a really cool watch from the very best from Patek Philippe. Now, back to Rolex. A couple of interesting pieces here. We have a white gold Daytona. On strap, this has a racing dial. I like this because it's kind of a juxtaposition between sportiness, the sportiness that comes with the dial, but white gold and a leather strap, which makes it slightly less sporty and more dressy. I think it's an interesting watch, very versatile for those reasons. I love picking this up and comparing it to a steel version. There is so much more heft, and comparing the two side by side, you really get a sense of that sort of champagne-y feel that you get, that sort of luster that you get with white gold. Really cool example. And next up, a must for any collector, is a 5512. I'm often asked, what's the difference between a 5512 and a 5513? And I have to admit that I don't always remember that this one, the 5512, not only is it much more rare, but it's cost certified too. So that just brings a little bit more interest to the watch. Certainly back in that period, there weren't many watches that went through that rigorous testing. And as a result, I think you'll find that these are about 10 times rarer than the equivalent 5513. It really is a case of the finer details that make this stand out above the 5513. One more watch that I really, really enjoy is this JLC Perpetual Calendar. It's from the Master Control line, and it just does so much for a watch of this value. I mean, already when you're looking in the low teens from a price perspective, you're not expecting to pick up a Perpetual Calendar, and certainly not one from the watchmaker's watchmaker. But it is very possible to do. This watch is, I don't think it's quite ultra thin, but it's certainly very thin. And with a black dial with white text, in the same way that Lange used that sort of white on black, you get that really nice contrast. I think you can make quite contemporary. I love the fact that this could arguably be a one watch collection. You can dress it up, dress it down, but it will always tell you the right time. Last week we featured the Blancpain 7002 in stainless steel, and this week we have its slightly more successful, slightly flashier big brother. This is a 36mm case as well, but with an open case back, a limited edition of 300, but in rose gold. I love the fact that the Breguet numerals, the applied rose gold, just stand out from that black two-tone sector dial. Really pops. For me, I think dress watches should be without a date, and this does exactly that. Very minimalist two-hand design, but packs so much punch. And I think this model is certainly worth a look if you're into neo-vintage. It's really quite special. One final watch that I want to talk about is the Patek Nautilus 7118. When I put this on, certainly with my brown suit, it just works. I'd argue that this is just a mid-size watch, and if you like the dial, you like the handset, and if you're in the market for a 3800 or a 5800, give this a go. It's absolutely overlooked. So that's this week's drop. Over 60 watches hitting the site, and a really nice mix. Go and check them out. I'll see you next time.